Hi everyone, so this video is a bit different one. I've never done something like this, so I'll see how I can actually manage to edit it. But I'm going to sort of review or react to a video. Well, so on ITV morning news thing, I don't really know. I don't really watch ITV. I rarely watch live TV anyway. But they had a debate with everyone's favourite animal rights organisation, just about whether aquariums should be allowed, whether they're ethical. And of course, as I keep aquariums, I keep freshwater, I've worked with others, and I also study fishes. I study freshwater catfishes, freshwater, well, it would be Lolcartoplex if people haven't seen any of my other videos, and I do loads of videos about these, so I thought I'd review it and I'll see how it gets on, because I think there's some interesting topics, but really a lot of it is very questionable. And so I've got my laptop really down now. I can't be bothered to bring up the desk. Well, I don't think you need to see my laptop at all, so I'm just going to play it here. And I'm just going to see how the sound goes with it, because I'm not entirely sure how to edit. I'm filming this now and it's a day later. The actual episode aired yesterday early in the morning. So I filmed it quite late, and I wanted to make I filmed it earlier in the day, but then I edited it quite late, and I wanted to make a disclaimer, just because I think it's become I guess it is quite an emotive topic, and I will be talking about some of the topics that have been brought up on social media, and I won't be bringing up anyone's posts or anyone's names, but I'll talk later about the different topics that have been brought up, or perhaps where the media has actually sort of misled people a little bit. And I will say that public speaking is it can be really difficult, especially when I think you're put on the spot. I find it even more difficult when you're doing it over over the camera sort of thing, with sort of Zoom style or Skype style sort of things. That can be a lot more difficult. So I just wanted to say that, and then obviously the rest of the video, but I'll see you in a second. Oh, and one quick thing, I have provided a load of references below, so throughout this I might be stating certain things, and there's a few references that might be interesting to research the topic further. I know the statistics are mentioned in the papers I've listed, and of course there's plenty more papers that could be of interest. And statistics such as, I think, 90% of freshwater fishes are captive bred, was it? It's in the paper. I haven't got the best memory for numbers, but there's plenty of papers listed in the actual description, so should that be of use, and I think it's very important to reference, especially topics like this. I'm just going to play it here, and I'm just going to see how the sound goes with it, because I'm not entirely sure how to edit. So I'll just turn it up. So the first point is that this isn't PETA saying that, but all throughout the entire thing, from PETA is about seas and marine fishes. Firstly, not all fishes in the aquarium, and it's really difficult to work out whether it's focused on public aquariums or aquariums in general, but while most public aquariums do have an awful lot of marine, not all are for marine, and just because something's not for marine doesn't mean it's from the sea. Because marine generally means it's from the sea, it's from oceans, salt water. Whereas then, and when it comes to the aquarium trade, I think it's a very high percentage. I can't give the actual percent. Maybe it's 80% or something like that. Actually, is freshwater, and it's dominated by a few species. So, and this, they say it all the time.
Aquariums are vital for educating people about the ocean and to boost funding for wildlife conservation projects. We're joined now by
yeah, I think it does. I've never worked in a public aquarium, and they do give a lot of ideas about conservation, promoting different conservation efforts, putting money towards it. A lot of the people there might have worked in different conservation efforts, but I can't really comment entirely. And I think when it comes to the home aquarium, it teaches about aquatic ecosystems in general. It doesn't have to be specifically marine, and I think this whole video is very focused, the whole of PETA's argument is focused on marine, and they seem to be very focused on how threatened marine is, but if you look at the statistics, freshwaters are even more threatened by a lot. So it's a bit
aquarium owner John Elwell and animal rights advocate Jennifer White. Good morning to both of you. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. Jennifer, then, are you really saying we should get rid of all aquariums? I mean, is this a realistic aim, do you think?
Morning, thanks so much for having me on. Well, we know in the UK that most of the fish and marine animals that we see in aquariums have actually been stolen from their homes in the wild.
It says here fish and marine organisms, so fish come in freshwater too, and stolen from the wild. I guess it's a very emotive term. Generally, most people say collected, to be honest, and collections always have a bad stigma. And I think I should mention that there's good and bad to fish keeping in general, and a lot of people are trying to improve it, and it's not like I'm arguing that there's no bad to fish keeping. There is bad practices. There's people unethically caring for their fish, too small setups, wrong diet, wrong tank mates. But it doesn't mean that the hobby is bad in general. After all, this hobby got me into scientifically studying the fishes.
And that's just not right. You know, these animals are meant to be swimming free, when in fact in aquariums they spend most of their time in tanks that are just far too small.
I think size of aquariums, yes, it really depends on the fishes, and sometimes they are too small. I think Pangasidae is a good example. It's a migratory large species, and it does need that large space to swim. The thing is, when you see them in public aquariums, they're most likely more rescues than they are wild caught. So it's not the public aquarium's fault, but then that's when it comes on to fish keepers in general buying fish that are way too big for their setup or not doing the right research, because we shouldn't throw it all on store staff.
Replicate what their natural homes would be in the wild. So whether that's from lack of space, you know, these fish are suffering, and a lot of the time they don't have enough environment.
Actually, I think what I forgot to mention maybe is that when they talk about when you talk about space, not all fishes need large amounts of space. Many fishes might inhabit very small areas, especially for some very territorial species. They might not roam that far, and there's a massive misconception. I guess we see coral reefs and think that the fish travel across the whole coral reef like in Nemo. They probably don't. I've never studied marine coral reefs like that, so I don't really know the behaviour of the fishes, but I'd say in freshwater there's a lot of fishes might not travel that far, and you can't generalise fishes in general.
Mental enrichment in their tanks, they don't have enough.
You can provide mental enrichment, definitely.
So of course, you know,
and I think that's something we need to work on as a hobby.
Unnatural conditions, when we know that they're from some of the world's most lush environments. You know, these animals are meant to be in the Great Barrier Reefs of the world.
So it's all. I think PETA's argument towards marine might be half ignorance and half a motive, because people actually care about marine unlike freshwater, but it seems a little bit more ignorant that freshwater exists and how threatened freshwater is. And I know I'm probably being biased in a bit, but it is a bit annoying that everyone, and a lot. Just because a fish is marine doesn't mean it's difficult to care for, and doesn't mean it's more intelligent, has amazing adaptations. Gymnotiforms and Memorides, the electric fishes, that is probably the best example. Oh, you've got Polypterus arowana, all those sort of, and catfishes. Oh. Not even farfishes.
I mean, Jennifer, I'm a big fan of leaving the oceans be. I think it's great for our ecosystem. But on the other hand, from a conservation point of view, if we were to put all those fish back into the sea,
it's not a good idea doing that.
A big part of the ticket sales and the gift shops actually get put back into
wild release is a really difficult thing, and as John will say, disease is a massive risk factor. The other thing is also these fish have possibly, well, they might not have the same, if there's, especially if they're captive bred, and a lot of fishes in the trade are captive bred. Some marine fishes are. You're releasing a genetic, what's the word? Genotypes into the wild population that might change the population as a whole, might change the adaptability of the population, especially if you're doing sort of captive variants. And I know PETA's solution to this as a shelter, as a what's it? A charity. Oh, so my card ran out of memory, so I had to delete all the videos that I never end up deleting on my camera. So yeah, I need to sort of be a bit more organised. Anyway, and I'm not, still 2 minutes.
Well, we know that actually aquariums cause a lot more harm than good a lot of the time, because 79% of the animals that you see in aquariums have been taken from the wild. So not only...
So that statistic depends on a freshwater marine, and depends whether what type of aquariums they actually talk about. So I assume, just scrolling down, I know the original article this is based on said public aquariums, so yeah, it depends. As I said, the statistic isn't quite the same when it comes to freshwater, and especially not the aquarium trade. Marine tends to be, and of course there are really questionable fishing tactics used in marine, and I would say freshwater maybe there is, but it's really important to recognise how wild capture of fishes actually provides an income for local people who would otherwise, they might have to go into stuff like industrial farming, so destroying the land, mining, more habitat destruction, deforestation. They might end up going into crime and other things, or even abstracting other species illegally. It's really difficult, but it is Awata does a good article on it, and there's plenty of articles on it. There is also that a lot of the fish are actually threatened in the wild due to habitat destruction. This is really shown in South America with dams, but then you've got places like I think it's the sort of farming practice in Borneo, maybe. I don't do Southeast Asian fishes, so I'm not entirely sure on that, but it's a really actually complicated subject that you can't sort of glaze over so much. And captive breeding comes with its own problems, such as waste. It also comes with problems of, I guess, even electricity, the actual energy to produce it, genetics, a lot of possible inbreeding, disease. A lot of diseases by monocultures are just magnified in a population. So yeah.
It's like incredibly destructive, going into coral reefs and
getting coral reefs.
Animals live together, but the fish themselves, they are torn away from their families. They're put in
families and fishes is not. Some fish do have a maternal, not maternal. Some fishes, the parents will care for them to a certain point, but it's not like family so much. I guess she's looking at more Nemo with clownfish, but I wouldn't say it's quite families. And there is an importance of social interaction and providing shoals for fishes that are social, but I wouldn't say it is like families.
In these tiny boxes, transported across the world. So
Yeah,
it's hardly surprising when you hear that
transported.
thousands of these animals actually die on these journeys every single year.
So the mortality, I think, really is a subject that, firstly, the statistic for marine, I believe, is a large number die within 1 year of being captured, and that does also mean within the aquariums that they're brought to, so that it can be home aquariums as well. But also I think that is more problem with people learning to research and being confident enough to research and using the right research, and also being confident to say when you don't know and trying to learn a bit more, because you can never stop learning. When you think you probably haven't learned that much. But the mortality for fishes in general, it's captive bred as well, is a questionable thing. And I have got a video filmed on ageing and mortality, and I don't think banning aquariums is a way to approach that. Because you could say ban all birds in captivity because parrots don't live up to their full lifespan, or all sorts of things like that.
So what we can start doing is phasing out aquariums. You know, these facilities can stop breeding animals, they can stop taking more animals.
So she says stop breeding them, but she's going on about wild caught. So, and isn't breeding only going to increase the population of threatened species in captivity? There are many species that are only found in captivity. Live bearers, there's plenty of those. Well, there's quite a few of those. I think they're godids. And I think there's probably a few killifish species, or at least killifish populations, because I've noticed that killifish people are really good at keeping an eye on populations.
From the wild, and then that money can go to preserving their natural habitats. You know, human destruction in the world's oceans at the moment is horrific, from trawlers to oil spills, you know, the fishing industry in general. So really they can get all the...
So she's talking about oil spills and that lot. Firstly, a lot of freshwater fishes, there's a lot of more artisan techniques from what I've seen used to catch them. So that, yes, they might be using boats to get to a locality, but it's not like, you know, industrial fishing. I'm not quite sure of marine, but then she's talking about this, but then tourism with those boats and stuff.
Need all the help they can get at the moment, really.
Well, John, Jennifer makes a strong argument there. 79% of fish in aquariums are caught in the wild. How do you
Never
feel
trust a
about that?
statistic
Obviously,
without
fish.
without a source.
Yeah, I think the biggest consideration that she's probably overlooking is the fact that diseases will adjust in captivity. So diseases will make the slightest little
This is
change,
true,
which will
that
mean that
a
could be
lot of
little
fishes
more
in
effective
captivity adapt to certain diseases, or they're not adapted to certain diseases.
Aquarium would be, you would potentially be introducing a disease that wild fish have got absolutely no immunity to. So you could risk an ecological disaster and wipe out the whole food chain.
And what about from an educational point of view? I can't lie, I've taken my son to a number of aquariums. It's always a great joy for him learning about fish. I mean, if we didn't have aquariums, where else would we see fish life?
Yeah, I was just talking to a member of the staff from the zoo about this, from the aquarium about this. We get to see fish and other animals on TV, which is brilliant, but
I
do
think
feel
TV
the
isn't
majority of conservationists and
always
fish
the
biologists
greatest
will
way
be
to be
inspired by
exposed to
seeing it in person.
species.
It's important to be able to view these sort of things in person, to bring their issues at the front of your mind. Without that, people may care, but it will be at the back of the mind.
I think in person is when you actually come face to face, and that comes with stores as well.
Yeah, Jennifer, picking
Seeing
up on
fish
that
in
point
stores.
with you, I mean, it's true, isn't it, that for a lot of people, they're never going to have the experience of seeing fish, marine life in their natural habitat, that actually seeing it in an aquarium is the only way that they're going to be able to appreciate some of the amazing fish that we have out there, and spark their interest in wanting to protect them and look after them.
I'm mean, I don't think we have any right to expect to see these animals, and of course if we do want to see them, it should be in their natural habitats, and there's absolutely nothing educational about taking children.
So I think it's difficult because a lot of people say you can go see them in a natural habitat, and so tourism industry, firstly you got the carbon footprint, not imprint, of the tourism industry. It's also expensive, so it excludes a whole entire group of people, and if you don't see a species, how do you know it exists? How do you get an interest in something you've never seen? Maybe a picture, or even just videos. You sometimes need to actually go up in person, and I think when you study a species, actually having it up close, whether you're keeping it as a pet of some kind in an aquarium, you actually see details that you wouldn't see otherwise, and that's why hobbyists are so important to science, because you can see things you might not have noticed otherwise. Especially if you're going to go diving, you're going to disrupt the whole lot. And diving, a lot of these fishes, well, I would say diving is for marine more so, but freshwater, so many fishes you can't actually see even probably diving. In freshwater, when it comes to blackwater, what can you see really? Well, it depends on blackwater.
To an aquarium, for example, you wouldn't take children to a prison to learn about how a human society functions, so why on earth would you take them to a prison for fish? There are so many amazing documentaries children can watch, or of course you can take them out into the wild
an ethically sized
and
tank.
observe fish in nature. But I don't think we don't need to consider this as something that we are entitled to see. And there's so much we can learn about these animals in ways that don't compromise their welfare.
And what about John's point there? Sorry, what
I
about
think
John's
it's
point
strong for
there about
PETA
if
to
you
talk about
release them
welfare.
into the wild, that actually that could be spreading diseases that they're used to being in captivity, that puts ecosystems at risk in itself.
Yeah, of course, rewilding programs are complex and they have to be treated incredibly carefully, but where there's a will, there's a way, and certainly for some species,
it will disrupt
like whales, for
habitats,
example,
and
they could be released from SeaWorld into sea pens where they'd be able to have some semblance of a normal life.
sea pens.
But I think, the bigger...
So if we know anything from farming food fishes, we know that sea pens are not always the greatest. I think it's the waste levels as well, and also parasites. I think they're a particular problem. And sea pens, what about for freshwater? And when it comes to freshwater, I guess in marine, you might have a coral reef, or you might have a river, and fishes will choose certain areas of the river to inhabit, and that's quite difficult to replicate, I think, in a sea pen which is still caging them. And you're going to be mixing predators with prey most likely because of space, and that comes with problems in itself.
Here is that we should be looking about how we can start to phase out aquariums so that no more fish are either bought and sold into this industry or are removed from their homes in the wild.
Isn't there a compromise here though? And what is it?
Well, I think, this isn't going to be happening overnight. Aquariums aren't going to shut their doors instantly. But the best thing that we can do for fish who are so intelligent, there's scores of scientific research saying how fish are
There is a lot of research
they feel pain and love,
into it,
just like any other animal.
and they are
And
intelligent.
yet we keep them in these tiny glass tanks when really they should
But
be
I
swimming
think
for miles in the ocean.
Don't anthropomorphise animals, which they seem PETA does with... fishes are intelligent, but they're not human. The world is different. They live in an aquatic habitat, and we can't even try to understand the world they see. They use different senses, like the lateral eye. We don't even have a comparison to that. And if you don't have the same senses, the same sort of communication, how can you try and really entirely understand it? Like, we've always failed with understanding other species that are a lot more easier to understand their communication. So we can't expect to understand fishes, and
it's pretty archaic and outdated, and it's not the way the times are heading.
John, could you see a compromise where, perhaps sort of the smaller tanks were maybe discouraged, and actually
I think
it was only
smaller
the larger
tanks-
aquariums that
well,
could
tanks
properly
for the size of
support
the fish.
in a semi-natural environment.
Like,
Would that work?
but I mean, like having the right size tank for the right fish.
I sort of understand the point, but we've got to understand that it's zoologists and biologists running these facilities, so they'll only put the animals in.
A lot of people that work in public aquariums
Okay,
are
well,
qualified
listen,
and
thank you both for
do
joining
know
us
about
this
the
morning.
fishes they're
That's John
keeping.
Elwell and Jennifer White. I think there'll be a lot of questions, won't there, on
Yeah.
that? Get in touch with
Anyway.
us this morning. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you for watching that bit. And so here's a difficult topic, and it is. So the next thing, the thing I would like, looking backwards, I'd like to really. I touched on it a little bit, but the media has really blown this part out of proportion, and that's disease transmission. So the actual YouTube post, I think, says something like aquarium fishes transmit diseases towards humans, and there's no denying, and it would be a complete lie, that animals cannot transmit diseases towards I don't know why it's focusing up there, I've just got but it'd be a lie to say that animals cannot transmit diseases towards people, and vice versa. Although it is a lot more difficult and more unlikely for diseases, maybe I should do a video on this, for diseases to transmit between more distantly related animals. So for example, primates will be a lot easier for diseases to transmit between the two, between humans and other primates, because they're so closely related. Diseases are very specialised. They tend to specialise in specific taxa, taxa being groups of animals, and also they tend to be a lot more species specific, but there is a whole variety, and sometimes you use names like septicemia. It doesn't mean it's the exact same pathogen involved. And I think the distinction between disease and pathogen I should have made. Disease can be, it's just, I guess, the effects of a pathogen maybe, because diseases can also be genetic. So I'd have to, someone else will have to clarify the actual definitions there, because, well, I've done such a shoddy job of it. But anyway, so it can happen. The most important thing to recognise is that it's unlikely. I know of no one, and I know a lot of fish keepers that have ever caught a disease off their fish. A lot of people are sticking their hands in the fish tanks all the time. They might have cuts, they might have, I bite my nails, so that's probably a really bad thing to do when I'm dealing with animals. And a lot, I've only heard of people like, this person said this person down the chain got certain disease, and so it is really unlikely. You're as likely to get, well, you're more likely to get other things from other animals, such as rodents with respiratory infections, but you can also transmit it the other way. A lot of people say about having a cold or flu around animals like rats can really be a killer, for the rat, not for the person. Or stuff like dogs, cats mix. Oh my god, toxoplasmosis, and it's just life in general. You could get from the ground. You can get tetanus and other infections, other parasites from just. So it's general life really. I don't think dealing with aquariums or fish expose you any more than say doing gardening. Gardening can have a lot of, well, I guess most hobbies can have sort of physical damage. So you could have stress, I think stress fractures, stress from having to dig heavy things, so stuff like that. Fish keeping, of course, there's heavy lifting. Horse as well. I will not go into the amount of damage people could get from horses, because they are all animals are risky, but you're riding it. Dogs, obviously. All animals have an element of risk. So the actual point though was in the video made was that fishes in captivity, and I did say it earlier on, carry diseases. All animals carry pathogens, whether it's bacteria, fungi, archaea, protozoa on your skin, in your gut, and generally most of the time it won't cause disease. Sometimes it might be symbiotic with you and actually cause benefits, and that was probably something I'll do in a later video, and I've probably discussed it before. But generally all organisms carry a whole range of different microbes. Maybe not microorganisms, but plants carry different ones, and fishes, snails, whatever. So they carry this entire ecosystem, and many can potentially cause disease. It's the same with humans. Humans carry a lot on their skin, around the nose, in the mouth, dogs as well, and that can cause disease, but generally it will only cause disease if the animal is sufficiently stressed. Hence why when people are quite stressed, they're more likely to get a cold, more likely to get a flu. And then if you're so it's the same with fish really, if they're not really being cared for properly. The problem is that generally you have an immunity to things you are exposed to, and we've seen that a lot with COVID, really, the virus, or that's how vaccines work. If you're exposed to something, you're going to have an immunity to it. And with the globalization of fishes, it has meant that fishes are coming from all around the world. And this means that diseases will be coming from different locations. And while aquarium fishes will be immune to it, and you have plenty of treatments for it, this means that if they were introduced into the wild, they could be carrying diseases that could infect and damage wild populations of fishes, while it won't cause any issues with the captive bred ones. So I think that is really important to actually recognise. But I think if you did reintroduction, it could be managed. The problem is also that those wild fishes will be having their own ecosystem of pathogens that they will transmit onto the captive bred ones. That's why so many people talk about not mixing different sources of, say, discus, because their different sources will come with their own ecosystem of pathogens that, while that individual source will be immune to, other sources won't be. So yeah, and that's kind of the main point of it. It doesn't mean that you're going to catch a disease from your fish, your dog won't. It's highly unlikely. It's an insane gap. Like, fishes are a massive tax of animals in the first place. So you are as closely related to a neon tetra as a neon tetra is related to sharks, really. So that's how much of a gap. Do you expect to catch any parasites off insects and stuff? They can carry certain things, but it's highly unlikely. The best thing generally is to do, if you're dealing with animals in general and you are worried, if you have a low immune system, wash your hands before and after putting your hands in and touching them. Don't spray your tanks with any chemicals, because that will blast the fishes, because a lot of chemicals come with other things, and even if alcohols evaporate after time, they can still be toxic in that short term. Alcohol is quite a common cleansing liquid. And I'm really anxious about actually publishing this video, so if it depends on the reaction, I might end up having to take it down, but then I don't know whether what I have to say is of any value. And I think it's always good to clarify things. When it comes to science of fishes, we are always learning. And I think, yeah, so I really hope that I hope nothing bad comes of it. And it's getting quite dark, it's going to rain again, my plants aren't happy, it's a bit dark in here, but I need grow lights. But fish keeping does an amazing amount of good. It's really beneficial for mental health. A lot of people that keep fish, and when you talk to them, so many people have worries in their lives, or they suffer with something, and it adds a break to their life. It's different from other animals because you're not a lot of animals you can't really watch so much and see their natural behaviours, but also it's like looking into another world, and I think it really helps understand a different group of animals that you wouldn't know otherwise. I think my discus is spawning, so I keep looking over and wish they wouldn't. But it does good in other ways. It educates about science, about ecosystems, because there's no other real hobby where you have that true ecosystem, not just the biotics, so the microbes, the invertebrates. You also have the abiotics, so you have to care for the water quality, which in our equivalent of dealing with terrestrial things, then that'd be air quality. And also you're managing waste differently. You don't have to just learn about biology, you have to learn about chemistry and other aspects of science. And I think for young people it can be really useful. As a hobby we have a lot to learn. The hobby has a lot to improve on. And I think that can be done by promoting ethical fish keeping based on science, and really, well, just ethical fish keeping. And we need to show that, oh god, it is raining now. We need to show that ethical fish keeping matters, and as a hobby we support it, and also being realistic. So I think sometimes there needs to be discussions made that sometimes are a bit awkward, whether one species, maybe it's not so suited to captivity, or maybe what some species shouldn't be as common as they are, and also discussing how the fishes, how we can improve their habitats in captivity, how we can improve their aquariums, I would say it's actually an ecosystem, their ecosystem in captivity, to meet their psychological and physiological requirements. And also maybe more discussions on breeding, breeding fishes. And on the topics of PETA saying you can watch it on TV, you can't watch Freshwater. There's no, oh my god, there is literally very few documentaries showing freshwater, and every time, I was gonna swear, it is always mammals, then they go over to marines, then they might look at mammals and birds again, and then they might look at Malawi cichlids. They never look at anything other than those lot. There might be the odd one on the electric eel, but for God's sake, that is not the only electric fish that fish that has really interesting abilities. I make it sound like there's some sort of X-Men fish, but then and there's really a lot more to it. And this is the reason why people forget freshwater, why the whole, PETA and that lot only talk about marines. They have a whole video talking about, showing loads of different freshwater fish, maybe with a few marines saying that they'd be happy in a marine environment. Well, if they were happy, some of those wouldn't even last second. They might last a little bit actually, because you can do salt dips and they do last, but it will be a slow, sort of stressful death on them. And there is no media attention to freshwater, and the only experience people have with it is aquariums, and that is probably one of the few ways to do it. And the understanding of freshwater systems is really sparse in many areas of the world. A lot of freshwater fish are threatened. There's so many that have gone extinct. And it doesn't mean it's about over-abstraction, which is, over-collecting. And some of these species that have been over-collected, as a hobby we do need to recognise, and I think for our longevity as a hobby, we do need to recognise this. But I think banning aquariums would make the whole thing for freshwater a lot worse. People will never see them, they wouldn't understand why you should preserve them. In the IUCN top 100, I think top 100 most threatened animals. The major reason they were put there was because no one cared for their conservation really, or very few cared. There was very few efforts. Most people didn't even know they existed, or really, it's just basically people don't care. And freshwater really, it is the forgotten fish really, and they are so threatened. They're so vital in our lives. A lot of people eat them. They're a natural resource for people. It's their economy, and I think especially in this country we don't actually have too many freshwater fish, and I think a lot of them aren't the most inspiring. Sorry to fishermen, but or anyone that does fishing, but it's true. So I've made this video really long now, so I'm going to stop. And I'm not saying that we don't have anywhere to improve on, but I'm not saying banning fish keeping does any good. It will probably make the whole thing worse. And a lot of species are only found in captivity now, and it might get worse with more species where their habitats are being destroyed. They're being just the pollution, damming, just a whole destruction, barriers in waterways. So if you look at a lot of UK waterways are managed. So it's got to sound, it's really rainy now. Yeah, so a lot of UK waterways are being managed, and the thing is that they're not as natural as you'd think they are, and this does cause a lot of issues for wildlife. And I was thinking of, so a lot of them have barriers, weirs and stuff, and this causes a lot of issues for migratory fish, but migratory fish are really suffering. Not that all of them belong in captivity, but ones that I think where we can help, we can captive breed and give a genetic resource for the future. And I think as a hobby, maybe we should look into maybe doing stud books, stuff like that, for working at genetics and avoiding inbreeding, stuff like that. But adding the fish back into the wild won't stop that habitat destruction. It will do far from that. And I think the UK isn't the problem. There are other countries that will pay a lot of money for a threatened species that is banned from export, not mentioning any particular ones, just because it's, well, I guess status, but people will pay for smuggled fish that are illegal to export. So maybe that's food for thought, because it's not solving the problem of why these fishes are threatened so much. Over abstraction, I guess, of some species, but I think as a hobby we need to become less addicted to certain species, clown loaches being one. Not everyone has to own a red-tailed black shark. Not everyone has to own a clown loach. There's more to fish keeping than having this set fish tank of certain fish. And in freshwater most of our fishes are captive bred, and I've already made statements on why wild catching is beneficial for ecosystems and also for people. And I guess as a hobby we can, I think as we learn more about how to breed certain species, that could really benefit the knowledge of certain species, and also add a resource should anything happen in the future. And while captive breeding is a difficult topic, this world is ever changing, and climate change is a big thing. So, and not just climate change, but the loss of biodiversity due to stuff like habitat destruction, pollution, mining, what else? Invasive species. Don't go releasing your fish just because of this video, please don't. Or because of what PETA says, don't release them into UK. Firstly, they might not survive. Secondly, they might, the point before about diseases. Thirdly, they might actually outcompete all the wild ones. And this is a point, like, this is a major issue. This is why there's so many of certain species, like in Florida, Southeast Asia, because people are releasing their pets thinking they're giving them a better life. No, they're just destroying ecosystems. So don't go releasing your pets, please. Really, please. They won't survive in this climate, but if you're in America and stuff, they might do it, and they'd be destroying hundreds, thousands of different species, whether it be animals, plants, what else? Fungi maybe, or other things. Please don't. It's really damaging. And if there are reintroduction programs, it should be done by those who are trained and educated in the topics, and also understand the species and the ecosystem involved. It's a really big effort to reintroduce species. As I think the best ones, and I'll probably, if I could find any papers, but if not I'll just do news articles. The best ones I've ever heard about are the Swarovski horses, reintroduced to Mongolia. There's some antelopes, but I can't remember what. And also some big birds in the Americas. Oh my god, I'm so rusty on this. But anyway, the amount of effort it takes to do that, and the amount of money as well. And money is a really difficult thing in conservation. So anyway, before I go on anymore, thank you for watching. Goodbye. PETA in general is a difficult one. And they are rather, problematic, I'd say. They have done a previous article about better fish, and from what I remember of it, they listed that fish should be transported in bags. And the second point was that they're transported with blue tranquilizer. The blue isn't tranquilizer, and I've only rarely actually experienced fish transported with the blue liquid, and I believe it's more of an antiseptic, antibacterial, and fish do get stressed when moving. Any animal gets stressed when moving, whether it's your pet cat, your pet dog, even plants get stressed. Mine really did stress when I moved house. So stress is part of life as well. It can trigger all sorts of beneficial, good behaviours such as breeding, spawning. So yeah, and I think I'll keep it at that because I don't want to make this video too long and have to, but I will say that freshwater exists, and I have no idea why PETA ignores it. But if you look, that WWF is starting to really talk about it. The IUCN has been talking about it for probably years. And PETA really doesn't seem to keep in date almost with, they don't seem to really understand entirely the topics they talk about, especially where I read the article about beekeeping, and I generally avoid them, and when they pop up on my social media pages I tend to block them because they just stress me out. But anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, but we'll see.